at any time. Drinks, all that good stuff over there. Hello, my name is Chad Henderson. I am a senior web developer over at Carlisle Food Service Products here in Oklahoma City. I've been doing web design for a long time, longer than I care to admit right now. And I want to talk a little bit today about style guides and what they can do for you, how they can help you, and how you can keep yourself sane while you're trying to do it. So let's get started. So most of you here have probably worked on web projects many times in your life, and you always start a project either from fresh start, or you inherit something, or you started a new company and they already have an existing thing that you have to take over, and everything usually starts out pretty fine at first, nice and easy, maybe a few little things that you're not sure about in the background, but you figure it out and you take your time and you start working on it and it goes okay. But then as you're going, you start to see some problems, some things that could be better, things that start to worry you a little bit, but you take them on one at a time, you do your best, start handling them, but then the feature creep starts to happen and all the advice from people higher up and all the other problems start to really add up, and pretty soon things are completely out of control. So what do? You need a style guide. See, it's funny because it's Rob Zombie, right? No? Okay, maybe not. So what is a style guide? What am I talking about? What is this covering today? A style guide, according to Wikipedia, is this long thing here. It's a set of standards for the writing and design of documents, blah, 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 blah. Let's cut this down to what's important. A style guide is a set of standards. It establishes and enforces style to improve communication. It ensures consistency and enforces best practices. So that's really what we want to take away from what a style guide is intended to accomplish. It's an overarching kind of a roadmap for you to know how to go and how to get there, where to go and how to get there, and how fast to go and that sort of thing. So what is a living style guide? A living style guide has three major things, and there's some others, but the main things I want to drive home is that it uses the real code. It uses the live code base, the same as the production website or the app itself. It has to be part of that ecosystem. So if you make a change to the code, it has to change. That change has to be reflected in the style guide immediately without you having to change anything. It has to be shared across everybody who's going to work on this, and they all have to have buy-in. They all have to be part of it. And it has to be continually developed. You can't just put it out there once and expect it to be good 6 months later if you don't touch it. It has to always be worked on and part of the workflow for the whole thing the whole project that you're doing. Without that being part of the workflow, it will fall apart and fail. What you want is for the living style guide to become the single source of truth. What this means is when you have to make a decision, you make it one time, it becomes part of this roadmap, it becomes part of this guide, and you can always refer back to that and know exactly what you want to do, whether it be colors to use, a typeface, a font size, the grid, the way all these things work, individual components, the way a form element looks. Once you decide how it works, you shouldn't have to make that decision again. It should become part of this, and going forward, anybody who comes in, if you have a new intern who comes in on the summer, they should not have to question how to do these things. It should be very clear. So what does a style guide include? What does it cover? What does it mean? Some of the main things you'll see in style guides would be things like brand guidelines. And this would be how to use your logo. What is the logo files exactly? How big should it be? What is the colors that represent the brand? This would be the company's identity, how the company is represented in the world. The design language, and this would also be the way that you design the products, how you style them, the tone they have, the attitude they have, all of these things. Pattern libraries, this is very important for what we're going to talk about. This would be reusable components, things that, like I said, the form elements or a header, and how you would reuse those and how to implement them easily. That should all be contained within the pattern library. and coding styles. And this could be things like, the age-old argument on how many tabs to use, tabs or spaces, 4 or 2. You guys hash that out in the beginning, figure it out, put it in your guide, don't ever talk about it again. Stuff like that. So do I really need one? Because this sounds like a lot of work. Well, maybe not if it's a really, really small, very simple project. You're doing a one-page thing for a garage sale. No, you don't need a style guide for that. If it's something that you're the only person who's ever going to work on it and you're not worried about it ever going to either a client or a teammate, no, you probably can get away without something like that. Or if you're in a situation where you have a very, very short time, you have a week to do it, then yeah, it makes sense to skip the style guide and go straight to getting a deliverable that you can get paid for. But I recommend if you can, after that deadline, go back and try to do one, especially if this project is going to be part of your life in any way in the future, because you're really going to benefit from that. So will your clients. Now, obviously, if it's any kind of a project that spans multiple items, multiple websites, a website and an app, things like that, then you're really going to benefit from having a style guide, having this guide that encompasses everything you're doing and make sure they're consistent across the board. If you work with more than one person, you work with a team, especially if your team is located in different parts of the country or the world, you really need something like this, because otherwise it's really easy to get out of communication and get out of sync with each other, and that can cause a lot of frustrations. And if you work for clients, when you give them the site or the app, having a style guide makes it way easier for them to take that and actually use it for a real purpose going into the future, because it's going to change after you let go of it. And they're either going to have to hire you again, or they're going to be able to do the simple things themselves because you've made it easy for them. Now, of course, if you want to get paid for the simple things, maybe you leave it off. I don't know. That's your call. Whoops. Okay, so we talked about what they are, so now we need to talk about how do you make one? How do you create one? Well, that's not easy. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but I recommend, for the beginning, start very, very simple. Don't overthink it. Do something, get your team together, agree that you're going to do this, make sure everybody understands what's happening. Find a simple tool somewhere and start making decisions, and then documenting those decisions. Once that process is going and the team is collaborating on this, then you can start digging into the more complex ways to implement this, either as part of the website or in other ways. Some examples of tools that you can use to start this collaboration: obviously Google Docs works really well. You have real-time collaboration. Dropbox has Paper now, which is a very similar product, very robust. Also, you have the ability to save all your assets as part of it through Dropbox, which is really nice, especially for prototyping, wireframing, things like that. Adobe PDFs can be used. You can do some mock-ups and documentation in there, and then have reviews and commentary through people that you're shared with. Or, if you really want to, you could do something like MySpace and go in there and make it happen. Obviously, that's a joke. Don't try and do that. That would be bad. Although Justin might jump in and help you. You didn't know they had a new logo? That's like 5 years ago, dude. I mean, it's really relevant, right? MySpace? So after you get started with making the decisions, if you have an existing site, one thing you're really going to want to do is an interface audit. You really got to start digging in and finding out what's already there, and seeing, where is the duplication? Where's the wasted code? Where are there 7 different versions of gray when you really only need one? And what I recommend you doing, and other people recommend this as well, take the website and actually just print the whole thing out, page by page. Or you can do like screenshots in Evernote or something like that. So long as you have every page physically in front of you, and then cut it up. This is something you might want to do with your team, because it can be a lot of cutting. Then take each element that you cut up, each component, and group them together and start finding all of the patterns, start finding the repetition, start finding all those scary things that you didn't realize were there. And take care of that. That'll really guide you and help you figure out, where do I need to start building components, and what is my pattern library going to look like? Once that process is going and you start to build the patterns and you start to build each of the elements, then I recommend you build what I call a litmus page. And basically, I've also heard this called a pattern portfolio and things like that. This is basically one page or a small section of pages that contain everything. They have all of the HTML elements, and they have all of the form elements, and they have all of everything you build is on this page living together in the same ecosystem. The reason for this is every time you make a change, every time you work on something, you adjust something, you add a new style, you add a new component, it'll show up on here when you break something. So if a style in one place affects a style in another place, which you obviously don't want, you'll see it on this page immediately. And you'll be able to spend time adding to this as you go along, and it'll become, you know, that one place to do a lot of testing. It's really easy to drop this page in any device and see really quickly if you've got problems somewhere. So this becomes a really easy way as that first step to test your components before you move into actually building the templates or the layouts or things like that. So once you do all that and you want to start working on actually building the component library, what I recommend is you group things up, and you want to show the element, how it is, how it's going to work, but you also want to show the code. You want to show exactly how you implement it, what classes you need, what HTML structure you need, if that's what you use. And it may be that you use something else besides those two things. For example, Lonely Planet has a whole infrastructure where they use JSON, and they have an entire system that will read that JSON and spit out the component in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it'll do all that work for you. So in this case, you would actually implement this in the system as opposed to raw HTML or CSS. And so that just, how you implement that is up to you. There's lots of different ways to approach that. This way, one of the nice benefits of this is it really forces you to work in that workflow with the style guide, because you can't go in and do your own HTML and come up with your own willy-nilly stuff. You're forced to build a component first. So that's pretty rigid, but it does work in achieving that goal, in the goal of keeping things in the same workflow. But the main important part of this is you have to show how it's going to be implemented. You want to make it dead simple for someone to come in here and use these components very easily. Don't make it, you know, just show a picture of it and, you know, put a hex code for a color and let them figure out everything else. You really want to make it dead simple. Cut and paste, boom, they're ready to go. So some useful tools that will help you achieve these goals. Nile Style Sheets is one that's been around for a long time, and it's really neat because basically in the CSS files, you'll basically, once you create the CSS for the object, you'll write a comment above it that's formatted to be read by the system, and that comment will define and describe exactly what this is used for and how it's used. And let's see if I can find an example. Once that's done, you'll run this, you know, it's a command line tool that you'll run. Probably you can do it as part of the workflow, like if you'd use Grunt or something like that, to automatically do that every time you make a change. And it will build out, let's see if I can find an example of what it generates. And it will build out an actual style guide for you based on those comments. That didn't look very good. Yeah, that was very similar to Foundation. Now Foundation and Bootstrap are both perfect examples of a pattern library style guide. That's exactly what they do, is you can use their system and they show you exactly how to implement everything with the code, with the class names and the structure, and they define how the JavaScript's going to work and the CSS and everything. So those are perfect examples of exactly a way to do this. They've just been built with the idea of giving them out for anybody as a starting point for their project. And that is awesome. If you want to start with something like that and build on it, no problem with that. As long as you understand it. Take the time to understand Foundation and Bootstrap, because there's a lot of stuff in there that you probably don't need that gets added onto your code that you could live without. So take the time to dig into it and really understand it before you use it. Yeah. Yeah, both of them have a building tool that when you go to download it, you can choose only what you want if that's what you choose to do. And you can actually do includes, like if you use SAS or less, you can choose the includes and only target the things you want that way as well. So there's ways to do that. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Pattern Lab, which is by Brad Frost, part of the Atomic Principle or Atomic Design Principles methodology, is really great too, and it's got a very specific idea about starting at the very smallest element, and they call it an atom, and then building your way up forward as you go to bigger and bigger things to combine these components into templates and then pages. And it's a really neat way to do it for your component library as well. Forces you to think at the smallest level and style things very, very granularly, and then let it build upon it to build the bigger things, which is really nice. So that's a really cool one as well. Filament Group has a nice one that they've built that will actually read your code and build the element out so that you can have it in the style guide. Why is that not working? Oh, that's weird. Try that again. Supposed to be a JavaScript thing there, but you can see that it read the code and built out a little section here. There we go. There we go. And you can use that to drop things straight into your style guide as well, and it'll do a lot of the work for you to define it and format it in a really nice, easy to use way. And you can use something like, I just went blank. There's a JavaScript library you can drop into your style guide that'll parse all of your JavaScript and your CSS and your HTML and color code it for you right in the website, and it looks really nice and makes it very easy to read. Barebones is a good starting point that lets you build out a pattern library and a style guide as well. It starts with all the basic HTML elements, form elements, things like that, and lets you style from there, and includes a nice thing where you can cut and paste the source code that way to drop it right into your document and keep going. And this is something that's designed to start in your own project and customize it as you need for you. There is a bunch more for just about any language or file ecosystem, design ecosystem you want to work in. So you should have no trouble finding something that works with your poison of choice. And I highly recommend you look into those. What you'll want to do is take one of these as a starting point and then build out your own personal boilerplate, your own personal starting point that you can use for project after project and get used to it and have it know exactly what it's going to do. That way, when you start a new project, you've solved most of your problems right off the bat. Then you just start theming and building custom elements for that particular job. And building the page templates. So the main thing I want to talk about on that is that I want to hammer home is that you have to maintain it. You have to keep working on it. Otherwise, it's going to be a waste of time and useless. It's going to be worse than useless because it's not going to match production and someone's going to try to use it and put out the wrong stuff. So you have to keep it up to date and you have to maintain it. So you'll want to pick a champion. You want to pick somebody whose job it is to make sure this gets done and make sure that the style guide is updated. There's companies that have whole teams that their only job is to keep the style guide up to date. So spoiler, it's probably going to be you. Just kind of accept that fact. But you'll also be the one who benefits from it. It'll save you a lot of heartache in the end. So good luck. That's pretty much it for my talk. I'm open to any questions, and if you guys want to see, we can do some looking around. There's some other tools we can show you as well if you have any interest in that. See if there's any questions on here. What was that last tool? Wow, I don't know when you posted that, so I have no idea. Any questions?